public comment period where those that wish to come forward to make public comment on any item on this agenda only, excluding any public hearings, this is your opportunity to do that. So the floor and the podium is open for you to do that. If you come forward, please state your name, your address, and then you have to fill out that little document, and we'll go from there. This is your opportunity. Second request for public comment.
My name is Don Clement, and 1526 Galleon Place, Bismarck. And thanks for allowing public comment. I appreciate that. I haven't made a lot of friends over the last 2 years. I recognize that. And I come here to talk about what's going to be talked about, which is a tax increment financing project. Here's all I ask. Going forward, you agree to negotiate in good faith as separate taxing entities. All projects that exempt property tax from the general fund of all property taxing entities longer than 5 years, as is the legislative intent of Senate Bill 2166. Again, this represents the 17 year of overlapping of Renaissance and TIF. I also ask that the Council of the City of Bismarck provide general public full disclosure in the future and transparency of all future property tax exemptions, which should include a calculation of return on investment to the general public. And I also ask one more thing, and it isn't just me, and most of you saw my testimony at the county, so I won't flash Governor Burgum's picture up again, but I will quote him. And that quote on the permanent TIF is this: Bismarck's got an unusual thing because it's the only one that I know of in the state that's what I call a permanent TIF. The brand of TIF gets sullied by permanent nature of the Bismarck TIF, which then creates political reactions by folks, and I'm sure he's referring to me. In my view, the permanent TIF shouldn't be a part of the equation. Those things ought to go away. All the programs that we have ought to focus toward incenting private investment in places where we've got existing infrastructure. And that would include lots of places in the city of Bismarck. Then he goes on to say the real subsidy is occurring when we take taxpayer money and build new roads on edges without any tax review, without any analysis, without any return on investment. In other words, he's saying when you bring data into the equation, ideology and our feel-good stuff goes away. So I'm just asking you, I'm pleading with you actually, to truly look at the data as you go forward with the TIF requests. Thank you. Am I supposed to sign here? Mayor Seminary?
No, you're good.
Okay.
We've seen you before.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Clement. Appreciate it. Public comment period is still open. Third request for public comment. We'll close the public comment. Thank you, Mr. Clement. On to item 4, update on 5 South project and tax increment financing district. I believe we have a couple of individuals that want to come up and share some thoughts with us.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioner members, for the record, my name is Ron Rauschenberger. I have not been involved in the 5 South project, but I am here on the request of Don Carden, who I know well from meeting him through the Dalrymple administration. And Don asked me to convey his apologies for not being able to be here himself, but wanted me to convey his thoughts. First of all, as you know, it's been quite a project. A lot of work, a lot of sweat, a lot of money has went into this project. Mr. Cardin has the utmost respect for the city of Bismarck and the Futures Group and the Development Group. Cardin Development is engaged in several architects and engineers, all at their own cost, on this project, and have never had a fee or any costs from the city or the development group. Cardin has expended between $1.5 million and $2 million on this project. Mr. Cardin is going to step down as the lead developer, and he thinks a more community-driven project would be right for this, and he is willing to convey all of his work, everything that they've done, all of his architectural engineering work, as well as the franchise fee that he paid between $200 and $250. And I don't know the exact amount because I wasn't involved in that. But that also, all of that would be conveyed to the Futures Group on behalf of this project if they want it and to move forward as a community group. That's totally up to them. And again, he has the utmost respect and has worked hard for this. He was encouraged by many, including the governor at the time when things were booming and so forth, and look at Bismarck as well as all over North Dakota, and he did. And so to that degree and his judgment, he feels it's best for him to step down as lead developer, but convey that almost $2 million worth of product and goods and expertise to the city and the Futures Group. And if he ever is called upon for advice on it or anything like that, that would be pro bono from here. So again, that's what he's conveying. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Rauschenberger? Thank you, Mr. Rauschenberger.
Yep,
We
thank you.
appreciate it.
I don't have to sign this, do I?
No, we've seen him before, too. You're good.
Just checking. Somebody had prepared a PowerPoint.
If you put it on the Elmo, I can see it.
Someone will have to assist me. Someone had prepared a PowerPoint, and I'm very illiterate at these, so I'm just doing handouts.
You have an extra one?
Yes, here you go. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm old school. So my name is Bruce Whitty, and I'm representing Bismarck Industries today as treasurer. And as you know, Bismarck Industries is a partner with the city of Bismarck and its development agreement, along with Cardin Development Group. So I'd like to give you a little status, a little background, and certainly we'll open up to questions relative to the project. But when we were before you in 2015, some time ago, discussing the 5 South project, we laid out the foundation, how the Bismarck-Mandan Chamber of Commerce and the Bismarck-Mandan Development Association believe a project like 5 South was important to the community in attracting and retaining talent. Approximately 1 year and 7 months after the city development agreement was signed, 5 South still remains critical. In fact, recent employment numbers indicate that in May 2014, when 5 South was just formulated, the unemployment rate was 2.2%, and that in May in 2017, the rate is 1.8%. Just this month, in discussing 5 South with the city's largest 2 employers outside of the state government, Sanford Health and CHI St. Alexis, both indicated that 5 South would have a positive impact on their recruiting. And in fact, quoting Dr. Craig Lamprecht of Sanford Health, He quotes and I state, "We love it. Right after our first priority of delivering the best in patient care, we must attract and retain talent. 5 South is a project that will help us do just that. A healthy and vibrant downtown is key to our downtown location." Additionally, the 24 members of the Bismarck Futures organization, and many of those members are here tonight, many are in the top 10 of the city's employers, and they have funded over $1.4 million in pre-development costs. They also believe in 5 South project, and it's just as critical today in competing regionally for the best talent. So, where are we today? Since our last presentation, Cardon Development has secured the Sheraton brand that will provide the convention amenities necessary for the event center. In addition, we introduced Crave and the sushi bar as part of that hotel project. We also worked with our engineers in a reduction with staff on the estimated public improvement costs, both in street as well as in parking. And additionally, we brought online a 60,000 square foot mixed-use building located on East 5th Street that is being led by a local developer. That building is already in the schematic stage and has been submitted to and valued by the city already. Yet, and it's a big yet, our challenge still remains with the hotel and the parking that is required for the hotel. According to Cardon Development, due to current market conditions and investment risk factors, a pro forma cannot be developed that will support a return required by equity investors. Furthermore, debt financing is now clouded by the financial difficulties of the limited service hotels in western North Dakota. Because of these circumstances and others, Bismarck Industries and Bismarck Futures has asked, and Cardon has agreed to, as Ron has mentioned, to step aside as master developer and to provide its pre-development assets to Bismarck Industries at no charge. Bismarck Industries will move forward full speed in an effort to develop the hotel and apartments as a community-based project. Because of Bismarck Industries' charter and because Bismarck Industries holds the parcel of land that is privately held, we are in a position to do certain things that a private developer cannot do. Our success with projects such as Unisys and with U.S. Healthcare are examples of projects that could not be accomplished by private development, yet were completed successfully by Bismarck Industries. Earlier this month, Bismarck Industries and Bismarck Futures both approved moving ahead with a project as a locally led development. In the coming weeks, we would like to work with city staff on assigning the current development agreement to Bismarck Industries with the understanding that Bismarck Industries would provide the documentation to validate the new TIF within 6 months of the assignment. If we cannot provide the documentation, the agreement would end. This action, of course, is subject to commission approval. Finally, I need to address the issue of the Renaissance Zone. Even though the Renaissance Zone is even though 5 South is not a Renaissance Zone project and receives no property tax forgiveness. Excuse me. In the case of 5 South, a TIF model that combines the original TIF and a new project-specific TIF is being used to finance public infrastructure, including streets, sidewalks, and much-needed public parking to be located across Bowen Avenue south of the Event Center. At the completion of the new TIF, we will have a district that will create property taxes to be shared by all government entities, somewhere in the range of $1 million, compared to approximately $50,000 we're currently generating in that district. For some reason, Bismarck's Renaissance Zone program is now being used as a TIF bargaining chip. As a result, the 5 South project, in our estimation, is being held as a hostage. This would make me feel very uncomfortable as a commissioner. Bismarck Industries and its partner, Bismarck Futures, have invested over $4 million in this project. And this does not include what the private investors or the private developers have invested, as referred to by Ron. While the regional economics of hotels and apartments and office buildings have changed over the 2 years, the need for Bismarck to attract and to retain and house talented young workers hasn't. The need for a four-star full-service convention center hotel also remains strong. And the folks at Marriott, parent company of the Sheraton Corporation, want to see the hotel move forward. Bismarck Industries stands ready to invest additional funds to help make 5 South a reality because we believe in its merits and its value to the city as a whole. We would like to have the opportunity to approach the project as a lead developer with a new set of eyes. And we would ask your consideration in improving the assignment of the development agreement when brought forward by staff. I'd be happy now to answer any questions about the projects and its status.
Yeah, Mr. Whitty, thank you, first of all, for not just your presentation tonight, but your involvement and all the partners since the project's inception. A couple of questions. The scope of the project today is arguably somewhat different, if not significantly different, than what was originally agreed upon at this commission table. That's a fair statement?
Yes, the size is different.
Yeah. Is it possible that the project, as it exists today, could be accomplished with a project-specific TIF alone, without the current TIF?
No, it could not.
Why is that?
We only have approximately 7 or 7.5 years, I believe, under the old TIF. That, as you know, that resource or that revenue is a diminishing item. So, with 7 years left, what we had just 2 years ago is less than what we had then. Although we have scaled down the public improvements, the requirements still mean that we need all the old TIF revenue, or at least a portion of that, subject to the, we have other uses for it right now that are mandated, but the balance that we had originally projected, we still need that to do the public improvements.
Other questions for Mr. Whitty? Commissioner Marquardt?
Mayor and Commissioners, Mr. Whitty, it's, your presentation, we've heard this all before. And it's been pushed back till now it's been 3 years. And I understand that there's been different issues that have come up, different reasons why, but, it's disconcerting a little bit to me that Mr. Cardin's not here when the project is not going his way, but when prior to, it seemed like he was here pushing it pretty heavy.
Well, if I might, Commissioner, I'd like to address that. Number one, Don Cardon was hired by Bismarck Industries. And so, the contract that we have is with Bismarck, Industries. So we hired him. Again, the reason that Cardon is not here and is not part of what Bismarck Industries is looking for is that we're looking for a different model than what we had. I think in any particular development project, and I'll give you a good concrete example, the Patterson Hotel, which I'm sure you're familiar with in downtown, that took over 3.5 years to come to realization. We've only had a year and 7 months since we signed this agreement. So, again, we've had hotels. We had a hotel, and that hotel decided that they didn't want to have their canopy as a convention hotel. We lost that. We lost some time. We had another hotel who came to the market, and we think this is a very good hotel. But we had a developer who couldn't put together the resources that couldn't do that. So Cardon decided to do it on his own. It's welcome to Development 101. It takes time. We had on U.S. Healthcare. We had to go, I can tell you how long that took. I mean, that took quite some time as well. So these things are not done overnight. That's why Bismarck Industries wants to look at this with a new set of eyes. Just as the mayor said, is that this project has changed in scope. Maybe we'll change it in scope as well. Maybe it'll go back up to what we're looking for so that we have a more balanced look to workforce housing and market housing. That's why we need the 6 months to review it. Before, it's the developer that was going to do that. Now we came to decision, it's time to move on and get some progress, like you say.
Mayor and Commissioner, some follow-up. Well, thank you, Bruce, for that clarification. Since there is such a dramatic change in the scope of the project, I don't see us pushing it forward anymore until you guys, Bismarck Futures and Bismarck Industries, gets that new fresh eyes to be able to look at that and bring forward your vision for
Well-
what your guys' vision is compared to what it was in the past.
That's-
Since there is a change in the scope of the project, that original contract, as far as how I feel, should not be extended. It should be come back through with new ideas, new numbers, and be presented to the city commission at that time.
Well, I think that would still have some, might have some merit, but again, I think 6 months is a reasonable amount of time to ask for that when you look at the complete scope. Again, based on what we invest, what we have done so far, and what we have acquired, we think 6 months is a reasonable time. Again, maybe you don't think 6 months is reasonable.
Mayor and Commissioners, and Bruce and I understand your dilemma that you're in, and I visited with you prior to that. And like I said, I believe in the project and how it was come about. I believe in that we need to do something with that area. I still do not believe in how you're funding that project.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Aspect?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Bruce, I don't have questions, but I have some thoughts. I don't know if others have questions, so I don't want to cut anybody off. But so if there's other questions, maybe we can get to that and come back, I guess. I just wanted to jump in because I'm ready to
Go ahead and move ahead. We can always come back to questions. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you. I want to thank Ron for the update in futures and industries and all of the groups for it. But I have to agree with Commissioner Marquardt that I think the scope has changed very significantly in terms of what you're proposing. And I would say that I'm excited about the fact that you want to take and look at this with a fresh set of eyes. What I would say is, just like a lot of things and delays happened in the 18 plus months that you've had to dig through this, so have things changed from the city perspective as well. And I know you referenced Renaissance Zone in your statement that you made and in your presentation, and I think that's an important consideration. And I don't necessarily disagree with your categorization that it's a bargaining chip. It may be, but here's the reality and the dilemma we're facing. The dilemma we're facing is we have a project that has changed very drastically from what was originally agreed to in the agreement. Secondly, we're facing a very successful program in the Renaissance Zone, facing very clear uncertainty because of the overlap with the existing TIF, which, good, bad, or indifferent, has become a lightning rod from where it is. What we also face is it's very clear from statements made by county officials, school board officials, and others in public settings and recorded and otherwise, is that if there isn't a TIF and a Renaissance Zone overlap, that the Renaissance Zone issue would move forward and be approved. And so when you have a program that has delivered over $52 million in investment over the life of its program, had 100 plus projects delivered, and that's being placed at serious risk because there's another 6-month delay after over 18 months of consideration. And I think you know as well, it's gone back farther than that. And so I think that I'm certainly not in favor of making the assignment just simply from the standpoint of, if we want a fresh set of eyes to look at that, I think that should happen. And I think exploring the use of either Renaissance Zone, if we can get that extended and continued, and or a project-specific TIF to evaluate how those items might move forward and a project could and should happen down there is appropriate, but that given the current circumstances, that can't happen. And I have to tell you, and you and I have had this conversation too, Bruce, and I appreciate your comment that, welcome to development, it takes time, but sometimes those time constraints run into other time constraints as well, and we as an entity have to weigh that. So it's my long way of getting, and Mr. Mayor, if you want, I'm happy to make a motion, given that it's pretty clear that Mr. Cardin stepping aside as master developer effectively nullifies the agreement in many aspects. And so if you're ready for a motion, I'm going to move that we direct staff to close the existing TIF district, that all funds collected after July 1 of 2017 be distributed in full proportion to each political subdivision. Additionally, that all funds collected before July 1 of 2017 be used to pay any outstanding TIF project debts, and that any remaining balance after those obligations be distributed proportionally to each political subdivision.
Second that.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion, commissioners. Commissioner Guy?
Thank you. Bruce, can you clarify for me what the old TIF was going, or the current TIF was going to pay for in this project?
That would generate approximately $1.8 million a year. And basically, in reviewing with staff last week, in fact, when we reviewed the financing and the funding, we anticipated that the old TIF would probably generate in the neighborhood of around $11 million in funding over 7 years. So that basically would pay for the parking deck that's south of the event center.
Okay, but it's just for one item in the project. It's not.
Well, it contributes to the overall project, but if you were to pick out an amount, it would fund the parking ramp or the deck that we're anticipating would be about 550 stalls, and that's coming in at about $11.5 million.
So it was my understanding from the development agreement and previous conversations that this current TIF was only going to pay for a parking ramp, period. And when that parking ramp was paid for, then the purpose of the old TIF was done and we let it go, you know, if it were to pay it off before the designated end of its life.
Commissioner Guy, I think your city attorney could probably advise us on this, but my understanding is that the old TIF was to pay for certain portions of public improvements on streets and roads into a certain area, as well as part of the public parking. So it would be a combination of two.
Am I wrong, Charlie?
Mayor and Commissioners, originally all of our discussions revolved around that sort of a split, but when we got to the development agreement, it became apparent that all of that revenue would be used to pay off the special assessments, which would have been used to fund all of the projects together, so there wouldn't really have been a way to discriminate how that would work once they're boiled into a special assessment payment on a special assessment bond.
Okay.
So, but technically, originally, we did have a lot of discussions with regard to the old TIF would pay for a certain aspect and the new TIF would pay for a different aspect. It really didn't matter, though, once they're commingled, because the bond payment wouldn't have been separated.
So if we let this current TIF go, we have to come up with another way to finance a good chunk of this project in order to, make it go forward.
That would be correct, Commissioner. We would have to figure out publicly how we could finance those type of improvements.
See, I'm not willing to give up on 5 South quite yet. I think this project is about the long view. It's about our ability to compete with communities like Dickinson and Jamestown. We had a conversation in our special assessment task force last week about dwindling sales taxes in Bismarck. And there was some conjecture as to what's causing that. And one of our members piped up and said, my kids are in hockey and wrestling. We used to have all of those tournaments here in Bismarck, but now cities like Dickinson and Jamestown can host their own tournaments. So now we're going there for these events rather than them coming here. Both of those communities each have a Menards, so they're buying their building supplies in their own community instead of coming here. So we're competing with them, and in order to do that, we need to be able to attract a different kind and larger events to that event center. And so I think that this project is critical to our ability to do that. And so along with that, 5 South is also critical to creating this volume of housing that we need downtown to make it viable in the long term. We don't have a lot of infill areas where we can put more than, a few apartments, renovate the second floor of a storefront here and there. So this is an opportunity to really nail down that aspect of the core of our city. So I'm not willing to give up on this project yet. I would much rather that we ask the county to work with us and give us 6 months before, 6 to 9 months before we make a decision on letting that TIF district go. If Bismarck Industries and Bismarck Futures can come back to us with a scalable, viable plan, and we still need that old TIF to fund part of it, perhaps they would agree to let us run it out until its current end date in order to fund that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Oban?
Bruce, can you clarify, when we talk about it's different in scope, can you simply tell us what that means?
What that means? Well, again, when we began the process, and that was the importance of Futures, this is a group of business people, groups of, people within the community that have invested in this project. It was not only important that we, get the money, but it was also important to get the vision. And the vision is that we wanted to make sure that we had an area that was activated. That's the reason why we designed 5th Street the way we designed it. We wanted an area, too, that applied for housing that had both workforce and retail or, market rate housing. So we had a mix of people in there. And we were also, of course, looking for that 4-star hotel that would serve important as the convention. So that's the vision that we had. The reality of development is that when you get a developer in, then he looks at that vision, he says, yes, that's great. But then he starts working with the contractors and the financiers and the investors in equity. And they say, well, that hotel just, is just too big. We need to downsize that hotel in order to make it work into our pro forma and what we can get a return on for investment. So they start downsizing and they start changing it a little bit. The apartments, for instance, we are looking, because the apartments market in Bismarck right now is kind of solidifying, we want to maybe downsize it a little bit. And we probably don't want to mess with workforce because in order to get a rate of return, we have to be able to sell it in 7 years. And if we have workforce, well, that's going to kind of hamper that sale in 7 years to where we can actually make some money. So it's all starting to get around the developer and what he wants and how he wants to get it done. The fresh set of eyes I'm looking at is Bismarck Industries doesn't care about selling anything in 7 years. You can look at some of the stuff we own. Some of my stockholders are here, and they probably think I've been keeping stuff too long. So we have a little longer run, let's say, on the apartments. So for us, workforce housing is great. That's not really an issue. Or we find a developer that says workforce housing isn't an issue. On the hotel side, as you know, Bismarck Industries is the major landholder down there along with the city who owns the strip mall. So if we were to acquire that whole piece of property, Bismarck Industries then is in a position for that whole entire block to do what we did for U.S. Healthcare, maybe give them free rent. That all of a sudden brings another developer in that says, okay, I can look at it differently, and I can go do different ways. I don't need this and don't that. So we can look at a different scale there. Those are the things we want to explore. Now, will we get back to a 220-room hotel in Bismarck? No. The reason being, our construction costs are too high. We got bad ground down there. That's it's a swamp. So, there's some challenges still. We talk about promises. I'm not talking promises here. I'm just talking visions. This is it, just vision. of what we're looking for. We have some challenges, we know that. But we think, again, in the market, based on what input that we've had in the past, we've had developers come to us and ask us, to take a look at it. We can't do anything because we had a contract with Cardon. Okay? Cardon was our master developer. And as I told the Commissioner Marquardt, that it takes time. And we had an agreement, we could cancel that at any time, but we have to sometimes let these things take their course. His model wasn't working. Don recognized that. We recognized it. Time to part ways. And so now we want to take another look at it. Now, I understand, again, that I can't promise you anything. All I can do is say, I can look at it. We want to try to make it work. It's the best I can do. I hope that helps you a little bit on how we're going to look at it differently.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Asbig?
Thank you. So a couple of clarifications of things. So to be clear, the deadline isn't a county deadline, it's a state deadline. That we have to have our application in by the end of July. So 6 months obviously puts us past that application deadline. And in reality, we have to have our application put together by the middle of July so that staff has the time to dot I's, cross T's, etc., which leaves us not a lot of time to pull stuff together to figure it out. Secondly, I agree with a lot of what commissioners have said, and I would circle back to two things. I, too, don't want to see the 5 South project go away, and I think there is still a potential. It is clear, based on statements, based on the notification we were given from Cardon, that the scope is going to have to change. And with that scope changing, there is an opportunity to relook at it, and I'm excited about the interest in doing that because I think it should. But what we're being asked is to look at accepting potential versus proven success. And trust me, I hate the fact that we're in this spot and this argument as well. And I think it probably would have been a lot different had things moved more quickly, but they haven't. For whatever reasons, and I'm not pointing fingers, I'm simply stating the realities of the situation we're in. And so I don't think us undoing the existing TIF and making sure that we continue to have a proven program that has delivered results for Bismarck unquestionably, and letting the local investment group take the information that has been gathered and getting the project to this point and looking at how do we rethink this and relook at this and figure out, do we still need 2 parking ramps? Do we still need all of the improvements that were suggested under the original one? And if we do, then yeah, we're going to have to figure out, is there a way to create a mechanism to pay for that under the rules that are now in place for that. But to sit and wait on a potential in risk, and I think it's a very significant risk of losing a proven program that has delivered, again, over $50 million in investment, over 100 projects, including some housing, certainly not as much as we'd like to have seen, and certainly not what was originally conceptually drafted in this project, I think would be a mistake. And I think that's a huge, huge risk to take, and one that's too far. I don't fault anybody for getting us to this spot, but just like Mr. Whitty says they'd like an opportunity to reevaluate because things have changed, I agree. So let's step back. Let's make sure we all know what we can do or could do or should do to move forward and reevaluate it. And if we can figure out a project that works down there, let's do it. But let's not abandon proven programs while we do that.
Commissioner Guy?
I just want to clarify my proposal that I'm thinking of here. I'm not suggesting we let the Renaissance zone go. I'm suggesting that we go to the county, and I'm well aware that this is a state deadline and not a county deadline, but we do need the county's approval and the school board's approval before our application goes to the state. So I'm proposing that we ask the county if they would approve the Renaissance zone application, if they would give us their support and give us 6 to 9 months to figure out whether or not we need this TIF district. If we don't need it, then we'll let it go. If 5 South can't happen, then we let it go. If we absolutely need it to help fund whatever version of 5 South we end up with, then we work with the county and, maybe we don't, maybe it's not the same level of funding from the TIF that we get now. I'm just saying, I think that it would be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we just let it go now.
Any other comments, commissioners? I'm going to share a couple. First of all, from day one, I have been very appreciative of all the efforts. From day one, this is regarding 5 South. I don't know that there's been a bigger supporter than me. And if you look back at all the ways I've been attacked, you probably would agree. I've probably been as big a supporter, and I have been dragged through the coals and kicked and beat, and many, many interesting things have been said about me. Majority of them false. False narratives have been created about the project and the people and the tools, and our community is torn apart at present. Torn apart. But where a place we're at right now is not healthy, it's not sustainable, in fact, it's disgusting. Period. That's what's happened. That's what's happened since this project started, and a little bit before that. So here's how I look at it. Project is critically important, and it's changed dramatically. I don't know that we could honestly say it's still one that it really is attracting and retaining talent in its current form. And to have a 6-month look at it based on economics, even with the current TIF, I don't know that we get there, based on my conversations with staff. Secondly, in terms of the project, my conversation with staff indicates that project-specific TIF has lots of merit if we were to close the current one down. So here's really where I'm leaning. Given the dramatic change from, and it's in Mr. Carton's letter, I think starting over is probably a good idea for our community. Does it present some hardship probably for some? It could. It might. There are still investments that exist, and there's still tools that can be used. There's still support at the commission table, irrespective of the vote. When we vote here momentarily, there's support, and you're telling us there's also support from the community. But I agree with Commissioner Asvig's take. We have a proven track record of successful implementation of a like tool, one that's granted to us by the state legislature with all of its current modifications. It's been very successful. Risking the loss of that is not good. Risking the loss of a 5-year extension, understanding that we have no idea what the next legislature will do. We have no idea what they'll do with this or TIF. But given the cards that are currently on the table, we know that there's a 5-year extension available to us. We also know there are projects that are in queue. There is interest in that program. Losing that is a proven tool that we've used well on the anticipation that in 6 months we have some type of a project that all of a sudden there's enough support at the table and there's enough support at the community level, which there will not be at the community level. There will not be. We've watched this long enough to know exactly what's going to happen. And I don't mean to sound like a pessimist, but you've been attacked as long as I have over things like this. You have a pretty good feeling for where it's going to go. So I'm going to support it because I think we can still accomplish a lot. I am absolutely convinced that since the investments are still there, there's the tool of project-specific TIF. I believe there will be an absolute willingness on the part of the other political subdivisions to work together. should they not do that, shame on them. Let's be really candid and frank about something with regards to the economic development of the entire county. It's in the city, period. It's in the city. And if we don't work together, shame on us. This gives us an opportunity to do that. And if we really are sincere, community-wide, about attracting and retaining talent, which is the lifeblood of our future, we want that entrepreneurial ecosystem to do what it's supposed to do. And most of that will be driven out of the core of a city. That's just the way it works. People can argue about that or on the fringe. That's not where it happens. It happens in the core of the city. I believe we can get that done because I have that much confidence in us as a community, in Bismarck Futures, in Bismarck investors. I have that much confidence in the leadership that's in this room. And I think we have to have a break to get that done and move forward and save a current tool and come back and say, this is where we're going again as a community. Any other comments? Call the roll.
Commissioner Aspig,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Guy,
Yes.
Oban,
Yes.
Seminary,
Yes, motion passes. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Bruce, Mr. Whitty.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Rauschenberger. Thank you for all that attended tonight for this subject matter. And I look forward to more engagement in the future and moving that project forward. Item 5, public hearing on a request from Lucky's 13 Pub, Kirkwood Mall LLC, to locate a new Class F1 liquor license at 915 South 3rd Street, doing business as Lucky 13. We'll hold it just a moment to let people clear the room. Second call for a public hearing on that item number 5. I won't read it again. Third and final call for public hearing. We'll close the public hearing.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second, almost a third. Any discussion, commissioners? Hearing, seeing none, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Aspig,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Guy,
Yes.
Oban,
Yes.
Seminary,
Yes, motion passes. Thank you, commissioners.